So once again, welcome to the Unshakable Foundation meeting of Cocaine Anonymous. This is a main share meeting, and today it's with great pleasure and lots of gratitude that we welcome Paula P, who's come to share on the topic of spiritual calculus for up to 40 minutes, after which we'll open the room up for Q&A. And with that, Paula, it's over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And thanks to the people who are doing service at this meeting, and welcome everyone, but particularly the newcomers. We are just so grateful that you're here, that we are shoulder to shoulder with you. Nobody's above you, nobody's below you. We are shoulder to shoulder. We're all trying to just live in recovery one more day, and we will help you and you will help us. And that's spiritual calculus too, right there. So this term, spiritual calculus, is from AA literature. It's from a book called The Language of the Heart. Here's how it looks without its cover. But anyway, you can get it on grapevine.org. And it's from the chapter in particular that's titled Emotional Sobriety, The Next Frontier. And this book, The Language of the Heart, is just a whole series of stories that Bill Wilson, our co-founder of AA, wrote for the Grapevine. And so I'm just gonna read the little part, not a lot, just a little part that where he talks about spiritual calculus. But since I don't want to read, I don't want to be in here and read at you, I'm just gonna explain the first part and then where he got to that term. So Bill Wilson and others, by the way, if you didn't know, anyway, wrote the big book when he had around 4 years of sobriety, and then he stayed sober. And then when he got into the double digits of sobriety, a horrific and crippling depression hit him. And so there he was, the co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, and he couldn't break it. He couldn't get out of it. He couldn't understand it. He'd done nothing different from one day to the next. And then all of a sudden, it was out of his control. And it hit, and it was rough. And so he was studying, he was asking himself, why can't the steps, which cured so many other things, why can't it cure this? And what he started doing is for some reason, he landed on the St. Francis prayer, which is in page 99 in R 12 by 12. And he realized, oh, that may be what it is. Maybe it's that. And so this was his awakening around that. So he wrote, "This seems to be the primary healing circuit, an outgoing love of God's creation and his people, by means of which we avail ourselves of his love for us. It is most clear that the real current can't flow until our paralyzing dependencies are broken, and broken at depth. Only then can we possibly have a glimmer of what adult love really is. Spiritual calculus, you say? Not a bit of it. Watch any AA of 6 months working with a new 12-step case. If the case says to the devil with you, the 12-stepper only smiles and turns to another case. He doesn't feel frustrated or rejected. If his next case responds and in turn starts to give love and attention to other alcoholics, yet gives none back to him, the sponsor is happy about it anyway. He still doesn't feel rejected. He just sees that where his service has come to fruition and will continue to come to fruition. Before I get much further into this, I want to say that my sobriety date is October 29th, 1979. Last week, I celebrated 45 years of continuous sobriety from alcohol, recovery from addiction, and there's no one more shocked by that fact, am I. So just, So many times in our literature, right now I've got in front of me a 12 by 12, as Bill sees the big book and Language of the Heart. And I'm looking up all kind of words that I have all in front of me. We know them too, that pain was the touchstone of spiritual progress. What? That sounds masochistic and rude and cult-like. Or the best part of the big, my favorite part of any AA literature, on page 124 in the big book, where it says this, cling. That's the first word. Cling to the thought that in God's hands, the dark past is the greatest possession you have. And that's always the part I quote. But here's what it says right after that, even more amazing. the key to life and happiness for others. With it, meaning with our dark past, we can avert death and misery for others. How is that possible? Isn't it true that I get sober and maybe I get a nice boyfriend and get to live happily after? No, that's not even the point. Sometimes that kind of thing happens, but what happens as we stay sober is it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what I get back. It doesn't matter if people like me. It doesn't matter what they say or don't say about me. It matters, am I using the formula of the 12 steps to then go and help somebody else? I remember once I was at a conference in California and just telling my story. I grew up in my mom's alcoholism. That doesn't make me any different from anybody else on here. It's just part of my story. And I was talking about my sons. I have 3 sons, and 2 of them, oh, never mind, just one now, drinks like we drank. The oldest one just celebrated 4 months of sobriety. But I was talking about that, this is maybe 5 years ago, and the pain, if you know, of having kiddos face in, standing at the jumping off place of the disease that we carry. And then after the conference, you're in a thank you line, people come up, and this conference, there was these 2 guys. They were about 26, 27 years old, about the age of my sons would have been when I gave that talk. And they came up to me and they said, "You can be our mom." And no one had ever said that to me before. But in an instant, I thought of all these things like, God, man, like in everybody's 4th step, the first one you do in particular, your mom is the first one on that. Like there's so many broken and harmed relationships with a mother. That's how it goes. And we work through it, but sometimes we don't, but that's how it goes. And what I realized in that second is they need a mom too. Do you know what I mean? And then here I am with no, at the time, 2 sons that I had all kind of space to fill. And here were 2 men, like in that spiritual, crazy magic math of the universe. Like only God could see it, could see a void in them, a void in me. And all of a sudden, here we are. And all I did was get up on that stage for that less than 1 hour of some little conference up in the mountains around Los Angeles and tell the language of my heart. That's all. How I'd failed, how I'd gotten up and tried again. How the inexplicable love and kindness of others is the reason I'm here talking to you today, is the reason I made it through all the dark places, including the deep, dark place Bill Wilson found himself when he wrote this at 10 years of sobriety. But many places in our literature, it says little terms like this. This is from step 7 in the 12 by 12, which is amazing. But anyway, that pain brought about a measure of humility, which we soon discovered to be a healer of pain. What? Humility? A healer of pain? The problem with me is I always think that my good idea is the right idea. Like when I got sober, a man with teeth would preferably, and a car, 2 important things, would make me happy. Money would make me happy. Wealth, popularity, whatever, whatever, fill in the blank, that's the thing. That's the thing. But here's step 7 tells us that's not the thing at all. To heal my pain, humility. And that word is used throughout all our literature, but nowhere more often than in 4, 3, 6, 7, 11, and 12. And it's all in the accumulation at step 12, because what is humility? In many descriptions of it, one of them in particular that we live on by the day is in service for others. I'm in service for others with no wanting anything in return. And that's what Bill alluded to in his chapter, Language of the Heart, man. You go to work with people and it doesn't work out, they drink or they turn on you or, whatever that is. How emotionally sober I am is how much that bothers me or doesn't bother me at all. Because I'm here to fulfill my primary purpose. Remember, that's the word it uses, man. Primary, basic, first. Like, get that one or none of the others are going to matter. Like, you can't get to 2 without 1, You can't get to the 2nd floor of a building without entering the first floor of a building. Primary purpose, stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. And if something in front of me is not fulfilling my primary purpose, I better pause and take a look at that. I got sober on the 3rd edition of the big book, but in front of me, I have the 4th edition of the big book. But since I got sober on the 3rd edition, I'm still calling like names of the stories the wrong name that they are in the 4th edition. But anyway, in the 3rd edition, there was a chapter that's now called something different in the 4th edition, but it's Dr. Alcoholic Addict is the name in the 3rd edition. And in that, he writes a whole lot. People really love this part, but he says, nothing happens in God's world by mistake. Now, that messed me up for a lot of years. I'm like, really? Let's talk about cancer? Really? You know, harmed children? Really? Sexual assault? Really? War? Really? You know? And then what I realized, I mean, geez, I was in double-digit sobriety by the time, like, oh, for my spiritual condition, it's not that nothing happens by mistake. Are you kidding? There's human and broken will involved. Of course, there's mistakes, but what it means to me is nothing happens in God's world without grace. That is magic math. That is also spiritual calculus. So there's not one experience that I've walked through, no matter how hard, that God wasn't able to provide some grace to it. God didn't have anything to do with the bad thing happening. That is not the God that I choose to walk hand in hand with. But there is grace. And usually the grace is in the helping others get through it very soon, shockingly soon, as a matter of fact. What a great example of this, I was about 18 years sober and married to my husband, which of course, well, anyway. And I had 2 children from my first marriage, and who lived with us and we raised. And we wanted another baby. And so in June of that year, my mother died. And by the end of that month, I'd lost my baby. Now, why the chapter that Bill wrote in the big book, or the Grapevine story Bill wrote about the next frontier, emotional sobriety, and how his lesson helped him through his crippling depression, is because I absolutely medically understand what he's talking about. I get it. And there's a furrow gouged in my neurotic pathways, starting from when I was a little girl, of wanting to die. And the proper use of the will in this program and the outside help it led me to has helped me to allow to change those pathways. And you can too. It just comes with a mantra. Find your mantra, man. Find it. Mine is from the big book where it says these things are poison. What it's talking about is the grouch and the brainstorm are the dubious luxury, the questionable luxury of normal men. But for alcoholics, these things are poison. So when the thoughts would start, I'd reroute it with the new thought. You can do it too. You can't control the first thought. You can the second. It takes a lot of practice, but it is the proper use of the will. But back to the story. So I lost my mom and I lost the baby we wanted very much. And I was up in one of the bedrooms in my house, and okay, sorry if this is too much, but the miscarriage was, I was hemorrhaging. And we had the nurse on call at the hospital, and because she was worried about me, and she was trying to talk me into go to the emergency room and get a transfusion. But I am sorry to say, I really am sorry to say that for about a minute there, I knew it wasn't a bad way to go out. And I'm sorry to say that, but it is the truth. I just thought losing my mom and losing that baby, even though people have been through far worse, I have been through far worse. In a moment, it felt like it was just too much. So I'm lying there with the nurse keep calling, trying to get me to go. My husband trying to get me to go as he's taking care of our boys on the first level. And then, but the thing is, I was a member of a home group. I was an active member, still am, of a home group in Alcoholics Anonymous, and they were not having any of that. So they came into my house without my permission, dropped off food for my family, got upstairs into my bedroom without my permission, sat down on my bed, took my hand, and talked me into going to get a transfusion. And here's the words they used. They said, Paula, you have to live through this. There's going to be someone who needs this experience from you. And it was only those words, because of my dark past at the moment, that I knew the math that always happens, the grace that always appears, that I got out of bed and went to the hospital and lived. And 2 weeks, just 2 weeks after that, my home group came to get me because I was physically able to go sit in a meeting. And so they came to get me, and I sat down. And I live in a town where there's a huge university, and we have a lot of visitors because of that in our meetings. And they asked for visitors, and a young man raised his hand. He says, yeah, I'm here from out of town, and because I'm here from my mother's funeral, and I had to get to a meeting before the funeral because I've never been sober without my mom, and I don't think I can make it. 2 weeks. So I raised my hand. I said, I got you. That's the grace. God didn't make me lose the baby. God didn't give my mom cancer. But grace of my home group members not caring what I said and doing the primary purpose anyway. Grace of that young man showing up, and who else could speak the language of the heart to him in that moment? I had experience I didn't even want to have, yet I did have it, and it would not go to waste. Nothing is wasted in God's economy. That is also straight from our literature. And those lines that say pain is the touchstone of all spiritual progress, the price of admission was pain, so many times our literature refers to those words, so many times. And I think to myself, when I read that part out loud to you about cling to the thought that in God's hands the dark past is the greatest possession you have. I mean, I came from a dark past. Many of us did. It doesn't have anything to do with my alcoholism, nothing. I'm just saying it's my experience in the chaos of my mom's alcoholism. And I remember hearing them say that my dark past is going to be the greatest possession I have. Excuse me. But my mind told me that my dark past was going to be the death of me, not something grace-filled or useful or even to be said out loud. And yet, I came to you when I was 17 years old, and you were a place of kindness and safe haven. And I promise you this, here's some more spiritual calculus. I'd been on probation in group homes. I was a ward of the state. I didn't have a parent. The state of Nebraska in the US was my guardian. I came to you at 17, wild and feral and savage, and with an organ of hate from my mom and the men she let in our home and all the stuff after the dash of the alcoholism that was beyond her control, just like our disease is beyond our control. And I promise you this, if my family would have been a good family or a safe family or a place of love, once I got out of institutions when I was almost 2 years sober, I never would be here today. I'd have gone back to that family, back to that town I did all my drinking and drugging in, and I wouldn't be your speaker today. But because they were so, not great, all I had was Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous, and you were a beautiful substitute. So I stayed for that. So even the dark past of my family in general became my life-saving tool because I clung to you. I clung to the goodness of you. And it's funny how our dark past, sometimes I don't even remember that I know an experience until God requires me to remember it. And I have to step forward and begin to fulfill my primary purpose in that moment. One of the things that happened in my mom's alcoholic home is again, it sounds so pitiful. I don't mean it to sound pitiful, so I just don't know other word to say it fast. But like I'd be a little girl in elementary school, and I'd be like in a chorus or on a volleyball game or whatever, and no one would be there to watch me. I don't mean it to sound pitiful. I'm just saying that's in alcoholism. Sometimes that happens. And I didn't remember that I even remembered that. And I've never even said those words out loud until the day came. Just about 8 or 9 years ago, when my sponsee began sponsoring a young woman who was 16 years old and who lived in a group home in our town. And my sponsee said to her, hey, my grand sponsee who's 16 was going to be in a little band performance at the school. Now, my grand sponsee had no family. She had nothing. She'd been put in that group home because her mother, her only relative, was so horrible. So I said to my sponsee, we're going. And my sponsee said, we are? I said, yes, get in the car. We're going to be late. So we rushed to get there. And we opened the doors to the risers, like in a high school gym, there's big risers that you sit on that are like 2 levels, and then the gym floor is where the performance was going to be. And we opened the risers and we came in the wrong door, and we're almost going to be late. And we got like 50 huge human beings between us and the place we need to stand if my grand sponsee is going to be able to look up and see that there are people there for her. Now remember, I didn't even remember that I remembered what it felt like to be a little kid. I'd never said the words aloud. Nobody was there at my things. I ever had feelings. I never even remembered that ever happened until God needed me to remember, me in particular to remember, because we had to get through those 50 people. My sponsee said, you think we could make it? I said, hold my latte. And so like I am pushing them over and I'm saying I'm sorry, but I am not sorry because I know what it means. So I get to the end, and if my grand sponsee looks up at just the right angle, she'll see us, man. She'll see us. And the conductor had just picked up his baton, and I rudely, and I don't care, yelled at her name. She looked up at us, and her face, man, can you even imagine her face when she saw people there for her? It had never happened in her whole life, and it hadn't happened for me. But God took that moment, because that morning, willing or not, I said the words and tried to believe, showing up for duty. God, where's the duty station today? And that's where God had me report to. And nobody else is pushy like me knew what it meant. That girl still calls me. She didn't make it. She got mad at something in her home group. Ever happen to you? She gave too much time to AA. But she still calls, man. She still calls. My whole point is keep the bridge built. That's my goal. Remember, it doesn't say get them sober. That's not what it says. Primary purpose, man, shoulder to shoulder, eyeball to eyeball. Language of the heart. We are the same. I am sure of this too. I think I've been sober long enough that I'm pretty sure this is true. I've seen this happen, that the service work we do today, let's say, the recovery work we do today, let's say, could easily be for the person who has not even taken their first drink yet. It could easily be for the person who has not even been born yet. That is some magic math there. And when I had a grandma when I was little, and she loved me, and she was my person. Everybody has, hopefully, everybody has a person. And all my juvenile delinquency, my mom, and I wanted her to keep it secret from my grandma because I cared what my grandma thought about me. But I had gotten sent away so long at the last time that she had to tell my grandma that I was a drug addict and I was an alcoholic and I was in trouble with the law. And my grandma, with her little Catholic veil over her little head, would go sit in the front pew and kneel of our cathedral, and she would pray for me. She prayed for a year or more before I finally got to you, before I finally really said my first sacred maybe even me, man, maybe even me. This could be something here for me. But I feel like prayers work in an odd way too. That somehow her prayer lifted up to wherever it goes, and just when the moment was right, it descended and changed something in me that I could say with my head tilted, could it be? Could it be even for me? And I remember being in treatment. I was 17 years old, and it was a long-term treatment center, and I was, sorry to cuss, basically an asshole. And there were two, I was the old, 17 was the oldest you could be. So there were me and two other, mean women in there. And we were outside the counselor's office once, and we told them loudly we were going to practice our First Amendment right to freedom of religion and, or freedom of press, freedom of speech. And so we were chanting loudly just to be assholes. And, so the meanest counselor, I don't know how they do it in the UK, but now they have to be nice to you. But back then they did not. They would just scream at us, cussing at us, all kinds of rude things. Well deserved. And she said to all three of us, she says, statistics are only 1 out of you 3 will make it. And remember, I told you in the beginning that my mind comes up with things I know are true. I am telling you, it's one of the clearest thoughts up to that point I had ever had. And I knew right there when she said those words, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that I would be the one who would not make it. That's where I would have bet my money. But odd things happened. People were kind who shouldn't have been kind. Beds became open for me in institutions that shouldn't have been open. People bought me $2 breakfast when I didn't have any money. People gave me plates when I didn't have any silverware plates. Apartments became available that somehow shouldn't have been available. Friends began to care about me and overlook my silliness, my anger, my conflict all the time. And little by slowly, as my friend Cindy says, I could come all the way in and begin to sit all the way down. The 12 steps are nothing but a formula. It's all they are. I'm a social scientist. I think of ways of facts and procedures and hypotheses. 12 steps, that's all they are. It's a formula to an outcome. That's all it is. Just think of it, baking a cake. That's also a formula, a recipe. You cannot, have the yummy cake at the end if you forget the salt or the butter. And all the 12 steps, man, every bit of them. You can't say I prayed, but I didn't meditate. No, can't do that. Says to meditate. Meditate. I have an anxiety disorder. I have a two, actually, doesn't matter. But anyway, I have an anxiety disorder that gives me tics. I have tics. I'm 62 years old, 45 years sober, and I have tics. Oh, well, I have fake blonde hair too. Same. But I remember thinking that stuff was going to take me out, man. I even sober, I thought, man, I cannot tell you I have these tics. I cannot tell you that the darkness descends on me so badly at 20 years of sobriety that I cannot open the door to my bedroom. I cannot tell you those things. I thought they were somehow a reflection of my lack of spiritual condition. That's ridiculous. They're things beyond my control. Moving forward and talking about them, helping people anyway. Now there's a spiritual condition. But I remember I was 20 years sober, and I started telling people about them, but still, they come and go as they will. I don't control it, like I said, but. So I was in bed waiting for one of them to pass, and God said to me, hey, you can help somebody. So I got out of bed because ticking, crawling, trudging, skipping, running, happy, joyous, or free, or depressed, or on the edge, or whatever, I can help somebody. That's the math. Because it doesn't matter. It doesn't say you'll get into service once you're happy. It doesn't say that. Do the work so you know, because nothing can be given away if you don't have it. Over and over in the big book. So before I did this last big book step study with my friend Marty J from Vancouver, I would have told you that the most common analogies that Bill Wilson used in the first 164 pages were naval anatomies, like boat, being the boat, the lifeboat, the waves, all these. But that's actually not true. It's building analogies over and over, man. It's accumulating in the fifth step where you walk through the archway, a free person at last. So just some of them: the keystone, that God is our director; the cement, our common peril and our common solution, the cornerstone, which is the willingness to believe in a power greater than ourselves, the foundation stone, which is helping others, and the foundation, which is my own conception of God. I cannot transmit something I haven't got. And there was this study, I'm in this, so I have a big life outside of AA. I love my full life in AA, and I got a full life not associated with AA. And much of it has to do with the spiritual community. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Anyway, so one time I was at this lady's house and she was telling me about, and she was smart too, like way smart. And she's telling me about this study, and she showed it to me that there was a scientific experiment. They're like, well, what is this prayer thing? And it was done. It wasn't like a religious community. It was a university. It was like, well, what is this? Let's just test it and see. So they put one person in a room with all these nodes and wires connected to their brain waves, and then another in another room, and one of them were related. So they said to the person that was standing with the scientist, not connected to, they said, okay, pray for the person in the other room, and then we'll tell you when to stop, when to start. And they were going to see, like, what did the electrons do in the brain? What did the heart rate do? All these things. And the person who was going to be the one praying said, I'm not religious. They said, well, oh, oops. Okay, just think good thoughts then. We'll tell you when to stop and when to not stop. And damn, if scientifically, even a good thought, man, on the other side with a wall in between them, and remember, I'm a scientist, made that person's neurons fire off in the positive way and made the heart rate lower. I mean, there is something here that we cannot explain. And why should we be able to explain it? I remember once, if you've heard my story, I had a near-death experience, and that my son actually did die for a minute before they brought him back. And my grandmother, who had been dead 10 years, came to either comfort me or take him or leave me a gift of the obviousness of something beyond where I live. I don't know the reason she came, but she was there. And just, there's for years I thought, what's the word that she brought with her? What is that feeling I had? I've never felt better. Not my first drink even felt better than that. And I can't find the word of it. And it wasn't that long ago I realized, of course, there's no word for it. It's not of this earth of words. It's from another place. And I remember once too, my sister and I broke down in Iowa day before Christmas Eve. 0-degree weather, and that farmer showed up out of nowhere and fixed our engine with duct tape and a wire coat hanger, and we tried to pay him, and he said, no, take it as a present from him. And there's something about that story that continues to feed me in different ways, though. For a long time, I thought the point of that happening was my sister, who's an atheist, and very smart, would have proof, lists and lists of proof of how it is true, how she has proof that there is no God, except for that story. She cannot explain that story. It's a hard job to be an atheist. I was one. I feel for you if you are, really, no shade, for real, because you have to have all this proof and never a maybe even. You have to be able to explain logically every single thing. Not even one thing can have a shadow of, I don't know how that happened, just like that, just perfectly like that. I don't have an explanation, because then everything falls apart. Whereas me, who's a believer this day, I can have, a million ways that God showed up, that God provided grace and kindness. I think why our literature never says, quit drinking and then you're done. I think what it's getting to is the goal of the 12th step, the culmination, the spiritual awakening we have as a result of these steps is all about service. Yes. Do I get happy when I do my second sacred maybe and come to that place of the second step? Do I get happiness and peace when I come to the third step, when I finally get to define my God, the one of my own understanding, and decide that that God is better than me, more worthy than me, kinder than me, smarter than me, that I can now trust my entire life and will with that God. The fourth step that gives me peace and perspective, that I can finally lay down the gavel of blame and self-pity and rage and uniqueness and step over to the defense table of the people I had just gotten done prosecuting and begin to see, oh, something must have gone terribly wrong in their lives that they did not deserve. And shouldn't I, who got the gift, the formula of Alcoholics Anonymous, be able to take all that and have more compassion for them? Yes, I can. Yes, I must. This is not new. This is not unique to Alcoholics Anonymous. There is not one historic civilization that did not have some kind of structure for helping others. Bill Wilson just put it down in step form, that's all. And attached that our lives are on the line if we don't do it. And I continue to learn, man. I mean, I was just on the phone 2 hours today with one of my closest friends and closest spiritual advisors, and just talking about being able to hold things loosely and wait for the space that the lesson will come, to be able to use the lesson over and over. I'm going to stop in just 1 second, and I'm going to stop. And after I say this one last thing is, I've never seen spiritual calculus more defined than in this one lesson that my friend had. She was in the Army, and she went into officer candidate school, and it's tough to make it through that. You mess up one race, you're out, and you're busted down to enlisted, and you're stuck because you're in a contract. So 4 years, you should have been an officer, now you're enlisted, and you're stuck. So she had a 50-pound backpack on, her and all the whole group, and all she had to do was second from last. That's all you got to be, just not last. A little bit faster than the one who's last. And the woman behind her, the last one, was really struggling, and she wasn't going to make it. So what my friend did, she turned around to that woman, took that woman's 50-pound back onto her own back. So now she had 100 pounds on, and together they finished, because that didn't count as a loss. And my friend said the weirdest thing happened, because she thought she wasn't going to make it either. But when she took the second 50 pounds on her back, all of a sudden the load was lighter, because that's how service works. That's the math of why we do this work. Thank you. Sorry, a million times. So I was giving birth to my oldest son. It was 36 hours, and they didn't know that the cord was wrapped around his neck, and I was on no medication, and except medication to make me have contractions. So with every contraction, my son was being strangled, and I'd lost a lot of blood. And so I turned to this side of my bed, and walking up to my bed was my grandmother, who had died 10 years before, and my friend Craig, who had died of AIDS just 5 months before. And like I said, I mean, I remember thinking at the time they were there to take me with them. And the feeling that I had, I'm telling you, I wanted to go. I've never felt that way. I didn't know. And I thought that because I'd lost so much blood, but they were there. I'm pretty sure, because my son was born not breathing, to take him, and I just got the gift of getting to see them for a millisecond, and that's the story.
Beautiful. Thank you, Paula. Next, we have Young. Would you like to come in with your question?
Yeah, thanks, Isaac. Hi, everyone. My name's Young, recovered addict. Thank you, Paula. Good to see you. Always really good to hear you. 45 years is like mind-blowing. After all this time, how do you continue to stay humble and to grow along spiritual lines?
Well, life has a funny way of making sure both those things happen. I don't know. I mean, I do the daily work. I meditate and pray on a daily basis. I inventory, spot check throughout the day. I inventory at night. I just do the work. It's nothing you guys aren't doing too on a daily basis. It's the same. It's just it's not just anything, it's the same. And so I continue to say yes to service. Things still hurt my feelings, which I wish they didn't anymore. I think I should be more badass than that. However, human. Third dimension. There are people who say, and they are wiser than me, that we are actually spiritual beings on a human existence or something. Not me, man. I am all third dimension right on in here. I just hoping to touch the glory every once in a while. And that's pretty much how it rolls. Yeah, just the daily work, man. Just I'm never too good for any of that. I'm shoulder to shoulder, 100%.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your question. And we've got another one in the chat. Has your faith/belief changed over the past 45 years?
A million different times, and it's supposed to. So when I finally thought there maybe be a God, for me at that time, I was young. I was early in my sobriety, early in my willingness to believe, and for me at that time, it was a male God, and it was all-encompassing, all-powerful God that found me parking places and jobs, or didn't, and that must be God's will, or gave me lessons, or wanted to teach me a lesson, and then then it's morphed in this whole other beautiful time. I had this like 5-year period of my life that was just necessary. And I was closely involved with a religious community, and thought about being a nun, no lie, but then I got pregnant. What's happening? So anyway, I thought about going the immaculate route, and I really did. I thought, well, I'll just tell him anyway. So, I mean, and then now it's a way broader, I guess, concept of God. I mean, my God, I know now, cried with me when I was a little girl. My God didn't make those bad things happen. My God said to me, hold on, sister, hold on, daughter, I'm sending you Alcoholics Anonymous. My God is a badass and is on the front line just a step or two ahead of me, man, and I'm just a foot soldier showing up. That's it. That tomorrow it might be different. Maybe my God might find parking places again, but not today. That's not my God.
Thank you, Paula, and thank you for asking the question. Next, we've got a question from Laura in the chat, which says, does having more knowledge of the books help you help others stay sober?
100%. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I am not all anal. I used to be. Like when I first fell in love with the big book, I used it as a weapon. I am ashamed to say, if somebody misquoted, said like on instead of upon, well, actually, they must usually mess it up with saying upon. Never mind. But anyway, I'll say it does not say that. Like I'd slam it open. Like that's not attractive. That's like bridge burning, FYI. But of course it does, man. Of course, because I want to be able to bring them to not my answer, to the answer. And I'm not going to be able to. Now, I'm not saying I don't have that great of a memory. So, like, there's people say on page, 56, second paragraph. I'm like, I am not all that cool at all, nor have any desire to be. But I know how to find what I need. I know that, I know that's in the third step, and go in the third step and find it. Of course, it's helpful. Yeah. Just like it'd be helpful that I know the directions to Rantoul, Illinois, too. That's helpful, too.
Thanks for the question, Laura. Next, we have Wendy. Would you like to come in with your question?
Hi, my name's Wendy, a very grateful recovered addict. Thanks for the meeting, and thank you so much for your share, Paula. Got so much from it. With all your years' experience, do you still encounter stumbling blocks, and if so, what are your major ones, and how do you deal with it?
Yeah, of course I do. All third dimension and all. Of course I do. Probably the fear of my sons dying of alcoholism and drug addiction was probably of my entire sobriety. That's probably got to be the biggest that lasted the longest. And it was inventory, oddly enough, that got me through it, that I saw a whole new perspective. And it was the fear inventory, actually, that did it. Writing it out in columns, because the first column, what am I afraid of? That my sons will die of alcoholism and drug addiction. Why am I holding on to this? And then when I realized by, getting with God and listening, why am I holding on to that worry and fretting? There's two reasons. One, because I think I will not survive this. The second was this, and this is where it was the most powerful, that I think by pre-worrying, by already crying over the fact that they might die, that somehow in some weird way, I'm paying forward on the pain. So if the worst happens, I'll already be a little bit down the road and it might not take me out. And I realized, so in the third column, what would God have me be? Why? God would have me live in the moment to enjoy the moments with them. If they're the last ones I get, God dang it, I want to enjoy them, be here with them.
Great question. Thank you, Wendy. Next up, we have Nick. Would you like to come in with your question?
Yeah, that Nick, alcoholic addict, that was a fantastic share. Just kind of asking about, when you got involved with your spiritual community, your religious community, you obviously grew along those lines. Did you ever find it sort of contradicted or took you away from working the program?
No, not at all. It both of the spiritual paths, AA and the community I was involved with, both do the same. I saw them as doing the same kind of work. It's a spiritual condition on, no, not, oh, you mean like time, like, oh, am I going to go to mass or am I going to go to a meeting? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, like well, that was kind of my experience, and obviously, staying in a fit spiritual condition is what I need to do. And I kind of fell victim to the belief that I could do that purely through the church route rather than AA, and found it kind of took me away. And then I was blocked off and ended up in a treatment center in Scarborough.
Yeah. Well, now you know. Now you know. You didn't know. Now you know. You know what I mean? Now you know that's not that path. Doing that didn't work for you. So it's a valuable lesson. Don't throw it away, man. Almost took you out to get that lesson. But yeah, no, I never it didn't cross my mind. I'm just going to go to church now, or I'm choose something to go to AA or whatever. Never crossed my mind, man. I don't want to be dying of this. I don't, not my plans.
Thank you for a great question, Nick. Next, we have a question from Holly in the chat, which says, have you felt you've spiritually outgrown a meeting or a home group in your time?
Nope, hot no on that. Don't even need to finish the sentence. Hell no. Are you kidding? Listen, I started my home group and the vote never goes my way in business meetings. They are my own sponsees vote against what I know to be right. 15 years of that now. Am I? Hell no. My big job at my home group with 45 years of sobriety, I chair the meeting. Hey, man. Heck, sometimes I'm the greeter. Sometimes I'm the coffee maker. I'm never the GSR. I don't ever want, you know what I mean? I've been a GSR before. It's vital, but I just don't want to be the meeting starter, the one with all the time, and the GSR. I don't want that kind of power. I don't want people, I don't know if I can explain that, but anyway, no, to answer your question.
Thanks, Holly, and thanks, Paula. Next, and might have to be the last question. How has being a scientist fitted in with a spiritual life?
So every once in a while, I'm like at a conference, they have the Friday night speaker, Saturday night speaker, and then they have a Sunday morning speaker, and they always call that the spiritual speaker. Rarely, and yet I have been asked to be the spiritual speaker, which is always really? Did you not hear my talk? But because I'm not, I wouldn't say I'm a woman of faith. Honestly, I wouldn't. I'd say I'm a woman of fact. I'd say that. There has been unexplainable occurrences that I can only have an answer of a power beyond ourselves that had something to do with that occurrence. That's just a formula. That's just a hypothesis to me. That is science to me. And I'm a historian. That's the kind of social scientist I am. I have seen things back in history that there is no other answer, even in my scientific brain, that can answer that except for there was a higher power in charge of that occurrence.
Thank you for the question, and thank you, Paula, for your answer. I'm going to fit one more in, and then we'll bring the meeting to a close. Over your 45 years, have you had many sponsors, and if so, why?
Did you say sponsors or sponsees?
Sponsors.
Heck yeah, I have. So the first, when I was 17, I got a sponsor. No, it was I was 19 years old, 2 years sober before I thought I might need a sponsor. Don't do that. But so what I got with my 19-year-old, 2 years of sobriety, good think kind of brain, I got a sponsor who was really popular in AA because my goal at the time was to be really popular in AA. So that's the sponsor I got. And then lived, spiritual drought where I was sober but with no foundation until I was almost 5 years sober, and finally, in the nick of time, fell in love with the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And then I got a sponsor, which is what a sponsor is for. That took me through the big book and the steps. I was about 8 years sober then, and then I moved, and it didn't occur to me. I mean, I don't know why, but that you can have a sponsor who doesn't live in your town. I mean, I don't know why that didn't strike me. But anyway, most of my sponsees don't live in my town. My sponsor doesn't live in my town. But then I moved, got one to where I moved again. There's been a lot of moving in my sobriety. Got a great sponsor. We became too close of friends, had some conflict over money, so we stayed friends, but it's just and then got an amazing sponsor. After 14 years with her, it just wasn't going to be a fit anymore. And then I got the sponsor I have now, which is Polly Pistol. For a long time. Had her for a long time.
Thank you, Paula, and thank you everyone who asked a question.